reception, good morning and welcome to another week of our literacy lessons. And we're going to have a look at another book this week, also written by Julia Donaldson. It's called The Smartest Giant in Town. Can you remember what happens in this book? Have you read this one before? I've got Chester here as well today. He wants to listen to the story as well. Now, you've impressed me with these letter joins that we haven't done in school. You've just been practicing them at home. So there are 3 more letters here for you to have a practice at today before you do your literacy, or while you're doing your literacy today. So the first one, we're going to have a look at the leading line on the sound S. So let's have a look at that together. The leading line and then the letter. Have a few goes of the S with the leading line. Let's have a look at the A. So the leading line and then the A afterwards. And again with the T sound, the leading ine and then the T. We've actually made a word there, at. We blended those together. So have a go at those letter joins today. And let me know how you get on. So before we read our story today, The Smartest Giant in Town, we've got a question here. It says, can you predict what might happen in the story before we read it? And when you're reading a book or a story, the picture on the front can give you a clue about what might happen in the story, but also what we call the blurb on the back of the book can also give you a little bit of a clue about what you might think might happen in this story. So the blurb on the back of The Smartest Giant says, one day when George sees a new shop selling giant-sized clothes, he decides it's time for a new look with smart trousers, a smart shirt, a stripy tie and shiny shoes. George is a new giant. But on his way home, he meets various animals who desperately need his help and his clothes. So I wonder if something's going to happen with his clothes in this story. Now I've made a prediction that I think, looking at this picture on the front, that the giant, I see his giant legs here, is going to help this little mouse. So I've got what's called a thought bubble here, a bit like a speech bubble, but a thought bubble has circles on the side when somebody's thinking about something. So I'm thinking in this story that the giant will help the mouse. Now you could tell your grown-up what you think might happen, or you could write your prediction down. So I'm going to write mine down. That tricky word, the giant will, what it will help the giant will help the mouse. The tricky word again. So I'm thinking in the story, the giant will help the mouse. So let's find out. George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same old pair of brown sandals and the same old patched up gown. I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, he said sadly. But one day, George noticed a new shop. It was full of smart clothes, so he bought a smart shirt, a smart pair of trousers, a smart belt, a smart stripy tie, some smart socks with diamonds up the side, and a pair of shiny new shoes. Now I'm the smartest giant in town, he said proudly. George left his old clothes behind in the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the pavement stood a giraffe who was sniffing sadly. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my neck," said the giraffe. "It's so very long and so very cold. I wish I had a warm, long scarf." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his stripy tie. "It didn't match my socks anyway," he said, as he wound it round and round the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. "Oh, thank you," said the giraffe. As George strode towards home, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town." Then George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating loudly. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sail," said the goat. "It blew away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his new white shirt. "It kept coming untucked anyway," he said, as he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. "Thank you," said the goat, and George strode off singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, but look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town." Next, George came to a tiny ruined house. Beside the house stood a little white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. "What's the matter?" said George. "It's our house," squeaked the mother mouse. "It burned down and now we've got nowhere to live. I wish we had a nice new house." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his shiny shoes. "It was giving me blisters anyway," he said, as the mouse and her babies scrambled inside. The shoe made a perfect home for them. "Thank you," they squeaked. George had to hop along the road now, but he didn't mind. As he hopped, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, my shoe is a house for a little white mouse, but look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town." Next, George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sleeping bag," said the fox. "I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his socks with diamonds up the side. "It was tickling my toes anyway," he said, as the fox snuggled into it. It made a very fine sleeping bag. "Thank you," said the fox, and George hopped on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, my shoe is a house for a little white mouse, one of my socks is a bed for a fox, but look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town." But then George came to a big, squelchy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's this bog," said the dog. "I need to get across, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe, dry path." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his smart new belt. "It was squashing my tummy anyway," he said, as he laid it down over the bog. It made an excellent path. "Thank you," said the dog. The wind started to blow, but still George didn't mind. He hopped on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, my shoe is a house for a little white mouse, one of my socks is a bed for a fox, my belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog, but..." What do you think's going to happen? "My trousers are falling down. I'm the coldest giant in town." Suddenly George felt sad and all shivery and not at all smart. He stood on one foot and thought, I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some new clothes, he decided. He turned round and he hopped all the way back to the shop. But when he got there, it was closed. Oh no, cried George. He sank down onto the doorstep and a tear ran down his nose. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met on his way home. Then out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. George looked closer. My gown, he yelled. My dear old gown and sandals. George put them on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. I'm the cosiest giant in town, he cried, and he danced home along the road. Outside his front door stood all the animals who had helped him, and they were carrying an enormous present. Come on, George, they said, open it. George untied the ribbon, and inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. George looked inside, and he was so excited to see what the animals had made him. He put his crown on his head and he opened the card. And inside it said, your tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. Your shirt's on a boat is a sail for a goat. Your shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of your socks is a bed for a fox. Your belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. So here's a very fine crown to go with the sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town. Yes, I agree, he was very, very kind. Now, let's have a look. Did I predict right what was going to happen in that story? I thought the giant would help the mouse. We're going to decide here whether my prediction was right. Did I get it right? Yes. Or was I wrong? No. A quick look back through the book to the mouse. Yes, I think the giant did help the mouse by giving them a new house, one of his shoes. So I'm going to say yes. My prediction was right. I predicted what might happen in this story. So I'd like you to have a go at your prediction, what you think could happen. And then when you've listened to the story, you could decide whether you got it right or not. And then you could have a go at making your very own crown, just like the animals made for George in the story. And I've made myself a crown here with a big feather on the top. So I look forward to seeing all the crowns that you could make today and whether you predicted what would happen in the story. I look forward to getting all your work and I'll see you later. Bye!